announced Desert Shield has become Operation Desert Storm.
The response here is if the city were under attack, the night sky filled with a hail of bullets and from anti-aircraft guns, and off in the distance you can hear what appears to be bombs of some kind hitting the ground, or perhaps artillery shells hitting the ground. There are loud reports, and you can feel the building of this very well-built hotel shaking underneath us as the attack apparently continues. So we'll continue to be here, looking out the window, telling you what we can tell you. Baghdad is still not blacked out.
The anti-aircraft weapons in the city center, where we are living, around the government buildings, erupted in fire. There must have been 200 guns firing into the sky. We did not see any aircraft around, but we did hear the alarm sirens. About 2 minutes after that, there were loud explosions, obviously bombing in at least 3 parts of the outskirts of the city. We have no idea what those targets were, but they were in the direction of the airport and some military barracks.
Those are reports from John Holloman and Peter Arnett of CNN reporting from Baghdad, where war apparently has begun. And within the last half hour, presidential spokesperson Marlin Fitzwater announced that Operation Desert Shield has become Operation Desert Storm.
As of 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Operation Desert Storm forces were engaging targets in Kuwait and Iraq. President Bush will address the nation at 9:00 p.m. tonight from the Oval Office. I'll try to get you more as soon as we can. Thank you very much.
As Marlin Fitzwater just told us, President Bush will have a statement in about an hour and a half. Meantime, a military spokesperson in central Saudi Arabia says the fighting started when the first F-15 fighter bombers took the air at 3:50 p.m. Oklahoma time. That was 12:50 in the morning in the Gulf region. Reporters from ABC and CNN reporting from Baghdad have said they see flashes in the sky above Baghdad. To repeat, the war in the Persian Gulf has begun. President Bush will address the nation at 8 o'clock tonight, Oklahoma time.
With war underway in the Mideast, more Oklahoma military units are being deployed. Tinker Air Force Base announced today that 53 members of the 507th Medical Squadron are being recalled to active duty in support of Operation Desert Shield. The Tactical Air Command Group will be stationed at Shaw Air Force Base Hospital in South Carolina. Air Force Reserve officials say the medics are being called into active duty for a period not to exceed 180 days. Tinker officials in Midwest cities say the reservists could be deployed overseas at a later date. And from Lawton, more than 100 National Guard troops are on their way to Saudi Arabia this evening after being moved out from Fort Sill Army Post. About 30 members of the 1045th Ordnance Detachment from Fort Sill left the post yesterday as the Army continues its deployment of reservists. They were joined by about 100 members of the 142nd Field Artillery Brigade headquarters.
The families of Oklahoma Guardsmen called to serve in the Mideast have, of course, been experiencing stressful times. This is a particularly difficult time. Many of those families have gathered in Ada and on the Oklahoma Road in Pontotoc County. Charles Newcomb has our report.
The National Guard Armory here in Ada was the mobilization point for many of the southeastern Oklahoma Guardsmen now serving in the Persian Gulf, including the first company to be called, the 2120th. Tonight, the Armory is a meeting place for the soldiers' families. And while none of those family members really expect the question to be magically answered at 11 o'clock, the question persists here: are we at war or are we not?
Most everybody's been real edgy today. Some have had to take off work because of the fact that we know at midnight tonight we're going to know whether we're going to war after midnight. It may not be for another month or two. We hope it's soon and just get it over with.
Gayla Hendershot's daughter-in-law is somewhere in Saudi Arabia. She shares the waiting with her family, thousands of miles away.
I'm scared.
It's a bad night.
It's a bad night, very bad. And where we're at are the 701st. We're far enough away, but still there's always that possibility.
In the opinion of most of these people, we are on the brink of war, and the deadline only makes it worse.
I suppose a deadline had to be set in order to have a line of demarcation, so to speak, but I think it has increased anxieties for people to know that, you know, if war is going to be declared, it could be today, and from what I hear on news reports, nothing may happen.
The Armory has not been closed to these freshman military families. Someone has been here to help since the call-ups began.
So when you're called up, all of a sudden, one day, you're an Army family or a military family. What do I do? Where do I go? You come here. We won't have all the answers, but we'll know how to get them, and we'll call them and get them for you. Or if you just want to come by and talk to someone, sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who knows where you're coming from.
Tonight, soldiers' children play where their fathers and mothers once trained. The waiting is particularly hard on the kids.
If we don't understand as adults all the reasons and the activities that are going on, how can we explain it to children? And children need a stable home environment, need security, and both parents there to support them. And if one parent's gone, it makes it very difficult for them.
Conversation among spouses left behind centers on their new life.
I think we ought to start now, writing our senators or congressmen. I mean, let them out.
A new batch of T-shirts has arrived for families of the 2120th. The best go first. Letters are written. And in southeastern Oklahoma, the waiting continues. On the Oklahoma Road in Ada, Charles Newcomb, Oklahoma News Report.
That story was taped last night. Of course, now the waiting has ended. It's a somber day across Oklahoma, across the world, across the nation, as thoughts of war weigh heavy on everyone's mind. Iraq did not leave Kuwait before the deadline, and now the first shots have been fired. Last night, hundreds of Oklahomans gathered in churches to pray for peace in the Persian Gulf, and many families attended support groups to talk about their fears. OETA's Karen Wicker shows us how one group spent last night counting down the hours to the deadline.
It's 6:30 and the night has just begun as loved ones make Valentines to send to their kids, wives, and husbands in the Mideast. This is supposed to be an upbeat evening.
To not sit home and just wait for the first gun to be fired or the first bomb to be dropped. And I want them to have positive energy so that we could work on other things and get our mind kind of off of it.
7 p.m. Signs of fear and anxiety began to show. This mother made a pillow of Saddam Hussein to help vent frustrations.
It's been beaten and kicked and abused, and he'll probably get a lot more before the evening's over.
It's now 7:30, and families gather in this support group to give each other strength. They talk about their last phone call from the Gulf.
What I love is he told his mom, don't send me no Valentines, I'll be home in time to get them.
This young bride was separated from her husband 5 days after they were married.
He said, I'm kind of excited. Is that strange? And I said, well, yeah, it kind of is strange. But I said, why? And he said, because I finally get to do what I've been waiting for 5 months, and I get to come home to my new wife.
Maybe it's because we want to help. We don't know exactly how. Maybe simply because there are times in our lives when we come up against things that we know that the only answer is our faith.
8:30 in the evening, a prayer vigil for peace. Loved ones lay pictures of their soldiers on the altar. Others sit silently in meditation.
I'm fearful, but I'm trying really hard to believe that because no shots have been fired yet, maybe we won't go to war. I think miracles could appear or happen at the last minute, and I'm praying for one.
Reporting from Tulsa, this is Karen Wicker, Oklahoma News Report.
Thanks, Karen. The Middle East crisis is on the minds of everyone, even the minds of elementary students. OETA visited a classroom in Tulsa today, and you might find the opinions of these 9, 10, and 11-year-olds maybe just like your own.
I have one cousin who's probably going to go over there, and I have a pen pal there.
My dad's a guard reserve, and he might have to go. I'm hoping he won't.
A conflict far away seems very close to these 4th and 5th graders. They discuss it in class every day and at home every night.
My father says that we'll probably go in and bomb Iraq and cut off the soldiers' food supply, which will make it easier for us to fight them because they won't have as much food and things.
Their opinions differ, but all of them worry about war.
I think we should continue peace sanctions as long as we can.
We could live on without that much oil for a while, but then then we would have to get more oil.
I think we should probably go in there and finally, you know, beat the Iraqis and get back out so we can get our oil, so it's be cheap. You know, our oil would be a lot cheaper than it is now.
Oil is the backbone of our country. I mean, plastic, everything's made out of oil practically. The oil, the industries would just drop. There wouldn't be as much plastic as we need, and gasoline would go up and everything.
They disagree on the need for war, but the majority believes it's justified.
He's waiting for us to do what we did with Hitler. Hitler asked if he could just take this little part of the country, and so we gave it to him, and he just kept asking for more and taking over more countries. That's what I think Saddam Hussein's waiting for us to do that for him. He's just going to say, I just want this little country and I won't take over this one and this one, but if we do that to him, he'll just take a bunch of countries. If he takes over Kuwait, then he'll go over to Saudi Arabia. And I think that Saudi Arabia should act on putting in more troops and stuff and have more of his men.
Well, even before the fighting began in the Middle East, and it has begun, the situation in the Persian Gulf was causing a change at the gas pump here and across the nation. Rising oil prices combined with uncertainty about the Middle East have resulted in another gasoline price increase. We could see gasoline prices shoot up 15 cents in the next day or so. And gas analyst Mac Beavers predicts even higher prices now that war has broken out.
We have a lot of damage over in Saudi Arabia. We may have a situation where crude prices go $50 and above, in which case we're talking about $1.60 a gallon gasoline or higher, but it appears unlikely that'll happen.
Beavers predicts gasoline prices will fall when the Persian Gulf situation settles down.
Meantime, Phillips Petroleum Company is imposing a surcharge on gasoline because of the volatile energy market. Now, marketers of Phillips 66 gasoline are paying a 10-cent surcharge for every gallon they buy over the maximums in their contracts. Phillips spokesperson Rob Phillips says it isn't a price increase for consumers. He says it's a deterrent to keep gas stations from hoarding due to the Mideast. Now, Phillips began charging the surcharge in August when Iraq invaded Kuwait. Phillips says company officials noted the demand going above normal in recent days, so they imposed it again.
Well, pleasant weather continued across the Center State today, and more to follow. I'll have all the weather information and forecast later in tonight's news.
Hello, I'm Rhonda Walters. Teenage pregnancy, drug abuse, poverty. These are just a few of the problems facing our young people across the country and right here in Oklahoma. Wednesday night at 7, OETA will present All Our Children with Bill Moyers, a powerful documentary that will probe this national tragedy and show you what can be done to stem the tide. As a mother of 4, I'm concerned with the future of our youth in Oklahoma. I believe All Our Children with Bill Moyers helps to provide answers to problems facing our youth. Please join us here on OETA Wednesday night at 7 and see how all Oklahomans can make a difference.
Beirut, 1981, and the war is raging.
You can get adapted. We got adapted to so many things.
A moving portrait of a remarkable family's experience of war. Beirut, the last home movie.
A state House committee has approval to a resolution stating support for U.S. troops in the Middle East. The House Rules Committee gave its approval to the resolution and sent it out to the House floor for action. Tulsa Representative Don Ross was the only committee member to speak against approval. Ross sponsored an amendment urging particular attention to African-American veterans, but the amendment was rejected. The measure is a committee substitute for the resolution introduced by Representative Dan Webb of Oklahoma City. Webb's original measure called for putting the legislature on record as supporting the president's Persian Gulf policies in the event of war. As approved, the committee substitute commends the U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf, recognizes the hardships they must endure, and declares continuing support for their efforts.
The push to get the legislature to pass a package which would attract the United Airlines maintenance facility to Oklahoma continued today, with both the Senate and the House acting on parts of the plan. OETA's Jan Lovell reports on today's Senate action.
Will the empty space behind me someday be filled with a billion-dollar aircraft maintenance facility employing more than 5,000 highly paid technicians? The Oklahoma State Senate said with a 41-to-1 vote today that they want the answer to be yes. Senator Ted Fisher brought a bill to the floor this morning filled with tax and other incentives aimed not just at trying to secure that United Airlines maintenance facility.
And as I understand, what United Airlines is proposing to construct is a maintenance facility, not a manufacturing facility. So why do we need Section 1 of the bill?
Senator Hendrick, number one, this law is written to embrace, as I mentioned earlier, an entire industry, both aircraft and manufacturing. Currently, we are aware of prospects ongoing right now that have continually told us in the state of Oklahoma that these are why we are not coming. We are trying to address not just United Airlines, but an entire industry.
Fisher says sales tax exemptions on items like computers, communications equipment, construction materials, repair equipment and parts, and fuel and oil for equipment will cost the state $5 to $7 million and will apply to existing industries meeting those criteria as well as new industries. A new formula for calculating income tax will cost the state another $600,000. Senator Vicki Miles LaGrange of Oklahoma City was a lonely no vote on the bill. She wants specific provisions for minority employment.
And this was a very tough vote for me, probably much tougher than 1017, and I expect to see it again, and hopefully some of my concerns can be resolved. But I guess it boils down to, is it United's money or is it our money? And I certainly want to see United Airlines here. Part of that construction will actually be financed by taxpayer dollars. The voters of my area overwhelmingly, consistently support tax increases.
Fisher and LaGrange are working on her concerns. In the meantime, the bill goes to the House. Jan Lovell, Oklahoma News Report.
Thank you, Jan. Shortly after the Senate passed that economic incentives package, the House approved a companion measure. The House will authorize Oklahoma County to vote on a temporary 1-cent sales tax hike to help pay for construction of the billion-dollar maintenance facility. OETA's Catherine Bennett has the story.
House Bill 1001 does not enact a tax hike. It just gives Oklahoma County permission to call an election to decide the issue. Nevertheless, lawmakers debated the measure for almost an hour.
I cannot afford to deny my constituents a voice and a vote on this sales tax, which vitally affects their ability to make a living or to sell a vacant house.
But Midwest City Representative Jim Isaac argued since Oklahoma City's Airport Trust would actually own the building that would house United, Oklahoma City, not the county, should foot the bill.
My town of Midwest City is faced with a rate increase on their utilities. They're going to propose a 1-cent sales tax. It's been on the books for some time. Spencer, Oklahoma's got one on the books. These little towns are just like your counties. They're fighting for their very life.
I talked to the mayor of Midwest City last night, and I said, were you ever notified at any time by ACOG, or were you ever notified by Mayor Norick about this process and this procedure? And the mayor assured me that he knew nothing about it. As I say, perhaps this is intra-county, intra-city, but there's a very fundamental principle at stake. When we as a body make a decision that can impact in the perception of Spencer, Oklahoma and Midwest City, their ability to control their own fate.
In this particular case, we ought to make the sacrifice in order to bring
5,000 to 8,000 jobs to the state of Oklahoma that will benefit not only Oklahoma City, but everybody in Oklahoma County, and frankly, everybody in the state of Oklahoma.
When it came down to it, the bill had no trouble passing. The final vote, 97-3. The county sales tax authorization bill will now go over to a Senate committee for a hearing tomorrow. That's expected to be voted out and then goes on to the full Senate Friday morning. Likewise, over in the House, a committee will be taking up the Senate package, which includes tax breaks and other economic incentives. That's expected to be passed over here and then go on to the full House Friday morning for a vote as well. Legislative leaders still believe they'll be able to adjourn the special session by Friday afternoon. At the state capitol, Catherine Bennett, Oklahoma News Report.
Thanks, Catherine, and let's go right to Ross Dixon with today's weather.
It was a nice day across the center state. Started out on a foggy note over in the eastern part of Oklahoma, reducing visibilities down to 0. And it looks like that's going to return tomorrow morning as fog will redevelop about the eastern 1/3 of Oklahoma with from line from around Tulsa down to about McAllister and points eastward into Arkansas. Early morning temperatures with clear to partly cloudy skies up in the Panhandle, northwest with 24 degrees at both Guyman, Gage Woodward area. Meanwhile, it was the 20s over central Oklahoma, some frost around, and again the fog managed to keep temperatures a little bit warmer in the northeastern sections of Oklahoma with their overnight lows generally in the 30s. Now during the afternoon the fog dissipated, and the last place it dissipated was up around Bartlesville across to Miami. They only managed to climb to 38 degrees compared to 60 degrees down at Ardmore. We generally had north to northwest winds at about 8 to 15 miles per hour. And this is going to be about the same story expected across the state tomorrow. On the national weather scene, not much is going on. The storm system located to the west of Oklahoma is going to spread some light rain in the Texas Panhandle, but hasn't yet produced much in the way of any freezing precipitation over New Mexico. The activity up to our northeast is a mix of snow and rain and some freezing rain, with heavier rains eastward into portions of New England, 80s for the warm spot down in southern Florida, and we have generally the 20s over most of the northern plains across into the upper lakes area. Tomorrow what we anticipate seeing is better weather along the northeastern part of the country, light snow around the Great Lakes, and down to our southwest the storm will take a very deep southerly track, bringing rain to portions of Texas and New Mexico. So if you're going out to California, I-40 would be a much better way to go tomorrow. Now the forecast for Oklahoma, well, we're calling for a fog in the east tonight, visibility is down to about 0. Chilly weather elsewise. Look for lows 25 degrees in the Panhandle, 35 degrees in the southeast.
Way street. The bus hit the car and spun around and hit another vehicle. None of the children were injured, but 2 drivers in the cars were taken to nearby hospitals. Voters in Green Country school districts went to the
And then on Sunday, a little bit cooler as a weak cool front moves through, but there'll be plenty of sunshine over the weekend. It should be a dry weekend, highs in the 40s on Sunday, then back into the 50s for Monday with winds just kind of flip-flopping around, and early weather will not be a major thing for the next 4 to 5 days.
Okay, Ross, thank you very much. The Oklahoma City School Board called it a victory, but not everyone is pleased with yesterday's Supreme Court busing decision. The NAACP President Roosevelt Milton calls the ruling a big step backward. He says when the case is heard in Oklahoma City Federal Court, the NAACP will be there to launch an attack.
But most certainly we are going to try to get more statements from authorities, more statements from people who have a background in this kind of thing. We're going to be in touch with our national office, who's going to, I'm sure, launch a comprehensive program nationwide, because it's not just Oklahoma City that's impacted by this.
Another civil rights activist, Clara Looper, says she is not surprised with yesterday's decision. She says the court can turn the civil rights movement back for a while, but it cannot hold justice back forever.
Repairs to a Logan County courtroom damaged in a riot will cost at least $5,100. The Guthrie courtroom was damaged last week. County commissioners opened bids yesterday for repairs and accepted the low bid. The riot broke out during a second-degree murder trial between witnesses and spectators. A mistrial was declared, and a new trial date hasn't yet been set.
A law to keep the 65-mile-per-hour speed limit on 3 state turnpikes is being sponsored by Oklahoma's U.S. Senator Don Nichols. Without congressional approval, the speed limit on 278 miles of non-interstate highways in Oklahoma could drop to 55 miles an hour next October. Now, Nichols' legislation would keep the 65 miles per hour speed limit on the Muskogee, Indian Nations, and Cimarron turnpikes and a portion of U.S. Highway 69 in eastern Oklahoma.
And repeating our top story, the war for the liberation of Kuwait has begun. White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater says President Bush ordered U.S. fighter bombers to attack targets in Iraq and Kuwait tonight. The president will speak to the nation later at 8 o'clock Oklahoma time. Now, live television broadcasts showed anti-aircraft fire illuminating the sky over Baghdad with tracer bullets streaking skyward. There were reports of thunderous explosions and fires in areas of the Iraqi capital, near a refinery and a communications center. In Jerusalem, CNN reports the Israeli army has advised people to remain inside their homes, near their open gas mask kits, and listen to the radio. We also have reports that the air raid sirens have gone off at some bases in Saudi Arabia. There has been no formal alarm, and the report said there is no reason to believe that an Iraqi attack is imminent. One other note, Defense Secretary Dick Cheney and Colin Powell, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, are expected to conduct a briefing at the Pentagon on the details of the attack on Iraq this evening. This briefing will follow the President's address to the nation, and that address, again, will begin at 8 o'clock tonight, Oklahoma time. Mary?
Wall Street closed today before the beginning of the war. The Dow gained 18 points to finish at 2508.91. Trading was moderate, 134 million shares. The dollar was up in Europe today. Gold prices also finished up. In London, gold finished at 403.25. Zurich was at 403. New York 403 even. New York silver at 419. And West Texas Intermediate. And that is the Oklahoma News Report this evening.
And be sure and tune in this evening at 9:30 on OETA as Mary Carlee hosts Oklahoma Hope.
We will have State Superintendent of Public Instruction Sandy Garrett, State Senator Penny Williams, and State Representative Linda Larison. We will discuss dropout prevention for school children in our state. That's after the Bill Moyer special, All Our Children. So join us tonight at 9:30. It's an excellent special.
Thanks for being with us, and good night.
Good night.
Tonight on OETA, join Bill Moyers at 7 as he reports on workable solutions to the dire predicament of 10 million youths who are at risk of emerging from school unprepared for life. Don't miss All Our Children with Bill Moyers at 7.
Seattle to Boston, non-smoking aisle.
How much is that?
You can pay us when you get to Boston, sir.
Huh?
Take the flight. If you enjoy it, just simply pay us when you get to Boston.
Lady, you're not flying on all engines.
At ETA Airlines, we trust our travelers.
This is crazy.
Can you imagine running a business like this? We can. OETA gives you hours and hours of great programs. You enjoy the shows, you decide when to pay.
Oh, come on, lady. Let me on the plane.
Complete trust in you may seem like a crazy way to do business,
Enjoy your flight.
but at OETA, it works. Please, take a moment now and return your program ballot, along with your renewed contribution. Or send a contribution directly to this address. Imagine running a business on trust. When you think about it, putting our trust in you isn't so crazy after all.
Middle name.
Oh, come on, lady. What's the catch?
There's no catch, sir. We trust you. Next.
Roundtable discussion on the week's latest issues in the news on the next McLaughlin Group, Saturday evening at 6.
Seriously.
On this one?
Yeah. See, now it's perfect. You know,
And if we study